Okay.
There you go. Well, you don't have to be that close, but.
I'm really excited to be here today because I'm like a genealogy family historian nut, geek. All right. So, as mentioned, Herman Carlstrom and Edith Carlstrom were my grandparents, or are my grandparents. My parents are Herman Jr., kind of, and Roberta Carlstrom. My dad would have loved to have been here today because he'd always be the one with the camera or the video recorder. Some of you may know him as Adrian. That was his middle name. So Herman and Edith had 5 children: Anne Marie, Herman Adrian, Helen Christine, Catherine Jane, who's here today, and Marshall, or Mort Andrew Carlstrom. So let me give you a couple stats. They had 5 children. They had 11 grandchildren and approximately 20 great-grandchildren, including some stepchildren, and 13 great-great-grandchildren. Herman was either the next to the youngest or the third to the youngest. And he was at the Carlstrom farm. He was a farmer. I have some tidbits to share with you that were from some writings by my grandmother, Edith, or my dad, Herman Adrian. So they had rather an unconventional life in a way. It wasn't quite traditional, even though they lived in Stockholm, Maine. And my grandmother, when she married my grandfather, it was their first marriage, but they were my grandfather was 35 years old, and my grandmother was 32 years old. And to me, that doesn't fit with the tradition of those times. I found something that my grandmother had written, and she literally wrote, "Tonight is my last night as an old maid," before she married my grandfather. And I have to tell you that Edith, she was an amazing woman. I don't know, some of you may remember her. She lived to be like 92, 93 years old. And before she married my grandfather, she had moved to California from Maine by herself. She had lived outside of Los Angeles. She did have some family out there. She had done things like waiting on tables. She might have worked for like the trolley or transit system. She did a lot of things. And when she came back, I think the thing that we have to be thankful for is Edith was very good friends with Selma Carlstrom. And Selma and her husband then, Otto, would go out with Edith and my grandfather, Herman. And I think that because of all the activities they did together, that's how my grandparents got together and got married. Let's see. They had their 5 children. They got married in November of 1930. It sounded like a cold, dreary night, and Herman was too sick to go pick up the flowers. They went to New Sweden to get married. They went to a movie, and then they went out to dinner. And they proceeded to have 5 children in the next 10 years. And they lived at the Carlstrom farm, but I don't quite understand if there was like a different section or another house, because she talked about her in-laws being in one house, and then they were in like another section or something. But the first thing she did, well, first of all, they had their honeymoon at her mother's house, which was kind of like a boarding type house, and they had a bridal bed. And then the next night after their wedding, she went up to the Carlstrom homestead and spent the night. And the first thing she did was rearrange her bedroom. She didn't like the way it was set up, I guess. So they had their 5 children, and my dad had memories of being at the Carlstrom farm, playing up in the attic with his sister Anne Marie. They would make paper dolls from like a Sears Roebuck catalog. They had, sorry, my dad's treat was to have like a real Coca-Cola back then. And I think my grandfather worked very hard. Unfortunately, they lost him. He died of a heart attack in 1942. He would be the last child that Ingabor would have to bury before she died. He passed after Anshelm, but before Ingabor. And so my grandmother was a widow at the age of 44. She never remarried. She did move back into Stockholm from the Township 16, Range 4, where the farm was. My dad kind of became the father, the man of the house around the age of 9. He has memories of having to kick out drunk men that were trying to be suitors of my grandmother, and then eventually suitors came for Anne Marie too. So he was stuck with a lot of responsibility at a young age. He'd have to sometimes make sure people got home okay. Like I said, he would kind of defend his mother and sister and younger siblings. He remembers, I guess Ingabor in her late years had dementia, and he remembers he'd have to, she'd be out on Route, is it Route 161, I think? She'd be out on the route heading to the lake, and he'd have to like bring her back home, and she'd be running with like a diaper pail. And I don't know what was in the diaper pail, but he'd be chasing her down with his bike, and then I guess she would like bite him sometimes and stuff, try to fight him off, but that was something that stuck out in his mind. So as I mentioned, they moved to Stockholm. My grandmother never remarried. They did lose one child at 5, Helen. That was around 1936. And all of 4 of the children were born up at the Township 16, Range 4, Carlstrom Farm. Anne Marie was the only one born in Caribou. My grandmother, to make income, she would be a bookkeeper, shopkeeper, work in an office. She was always picking spuds, and their nicknames, my grandparents' nicknames, were Jaime and Dee Dee. And I think that's about it. But I wish I could have met my grandfather. None of us got to meet him, the next generation. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate that. Now, Terry Lynn Archer from Lincoln, Maine, granddaughter of Andrew Carlstrom. There she is. Thank you, Terry.
Hello. I have the privilege to talk about my grandfather, Andrew Carlstrom, because I'm the oldest grandchild. In fact, I had the honor of speaking about Andrew, who I called Papa, at a reunion when I was 33. Today, I'm in my 65th year, and I'm amazed as how the days seem to zoom by. I loved Papa Carlstrom, and I know he loved me. My grandfather, like my father, Francis Leroy, was a very loving man. We lived in the same house as Nanny and Papa and my young aunts and uncles after I was born. And later, when Nanny and Papa built the little house next to the big house, I was just a beaten path away from the love and the life in and around their home. One of my favorite places as a child was perched on Papa's lap. Maybe some of my cousins and my sister remember being bounced on his knee as he said a little ditty that went something like this: toe-tee-tee, toe-tee-tee, toe-tee-tee-toe. Andrew Carlstrom was also an extremely hard worker and was famously strong. Now, this may be a Paul Bunyan myth, but the rumor is that he was able to stack potato barrels 3 high, if you can imagine that. I didn't realize until recently that Papa's father, Anshelm, had a store, rented cabins, and made and sold boats and skis. How awesome. This helps me understand my Papa better in retrospect, because he was brimming with business ideas. He was always scheming about how he could make $1 million. One of his brainstorms was to collect bottles of spring water that came out near Amadeus Lake in Millinocket and sell them to tourists. Bottled water, Andrew? People said to him back in the 50s, no one would pay money for water. Papa had an entrepreneurial spirit early on. He helped guide hunters who came to the Carlstrom's farm. Later, he had a taxi service in New Sweden and gave some people hair-raising rides in his Model A Ford. When that business didn't work out, he came to Millinocket and worked at the mill, Great Northern Paper Company, as a pipe fitter. There's a pipe fence at Ripagenas Dam that we believe Papa made, and it's still standing strong some 80 years later. When mill workers were in short supply during World War II, there were 600 men from Millinocket alone that were serving in the military during World War II. Papa worked 16-hour days for 2 years straight. He also owned a dump truck and would haul gravel and snow to help support his large family. Papa made that family with a little Irish lass named Marcella Quinn. He was originally interested in her sister Catherine, but then turned his attention towards my grandmother. Andrew and Marcella married in Millinocket and had 8 children in 9 years. 7 survived and 3 are here today. My father, Francis, he's a sweetie. My lovely Aunt Mary, and Uncle Everett, better known as Uncle Ansel. No grass grew under Andrew Carlstrom's feet, and he also loved a good time. He was the life of the party. He liked his toddies, and he would get out a squeeze box during the family's Thursday night sing-alongs. These were held in the big house on Lincoln Street where I grew up. My great-grandfather, Patrick Silas Quinn, would come too. And those two would be happy together singing tunes like, "When Irish Eyes Are Smiling," until they had 1 drink too many. And then an argument about religion would often break up the party. You see, Papa was a Protestant and Papa Quinn was an Irish Catholic. So Nanny and Papa had a mixed marriage, which was scandalous back in those days. Considering under the circumstances, it's pretty neat how they got along as well as they did. That's the kind of fun-loving crew Andrew Carlstrom raised. We are good, hardworking people, and he was proud of each one of them. Some more facts about Andrew Carlstrom. He was a sharpshooter and loved to hunt. Papa tagged a deer on the very day he died. Like many in the Carlstrom family, he was not opposed to shooting multiple deer in a season. When shrapnel at the mill blinded his right eye, he started learning to shoot with the left and was still a heck of a shot. He and my grandmother, Marcella, had foster children before that was even heard of, and those children would come back as adults to visit long after they had left the nest. There are many stories about Papa, like the time he decided he wanted to make money by raising chickens in the attic. And the family had to work hard to keep them quiet so the neighbors wouldn't find out. Those of us who knew him have many happy memories, like piling into his dump truck, picking blueberries at the burnt land near Mount Katahdin. Papa also loved it when his siblings would visit. I remember many of them coming on more than one occasion, and because we lived right next door, I would notice when a car pulled up in the driveway or alongside the house, and I would just make myself welcome, come down that beaten path, sit on the couch, and visit with that family too. And it's so exciting to see some of those faces even here today, recognize them. Papa had all kinds of sayings like, "Oh Lord, look down upon this ham, give me a steak for goodness sake, this ham ain't worth a damn." Or, "Holy stockings." He used to say this to my mother, Arlene, whose grandfather came from Norway. He loved to tease. 10,000 Swedes crept through the weeds in search of one Norwegian. Papa loved to polka and taught all his kids and grandkids to polka too. Papa had a lot of things go his way in life, but he did not get his way in naming his first grandchild. If he had, you would not be listening to Terry Lynn right now, you'd be listening to Ingeborg. If Andrew Carlstrom were alive today, he'd be pretty proud of his 39 descendants. Many of us have chosen professions in healthcare, others in teaching, law enforcement. We work as secretaries and security officers, marketing professionals, accountants, and administration roles. We own homes and camps and hunt and fish and still enjoy sing-alongs. And many of us are people of faith, and most of us can still do the polka. Papa would be proud of all that, but he'd be most pleased at the way we live our lives to the fullest in the Andrew Carlstrom clan, and how we, like him, turned out to be loving and hardworking people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingeborg. I'm so glad he's filming this because it's a lot of information I want to listen to again. This has been really informative for me, so I really appreciate that. So, last but not least, Larry Harrison from Corseville, am I spelled? Crouseville, Maine, grandson of Selma Carlstrom. So, Larry, come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Larry Harrison, and my brother John is here with me also. We are the sons of Lorraine Heed Harrison, firstborn daughter of Selma and Otto Heed. My memories of my Gram Selma go back to the late 50s and 60s. I remember the large family gatherings in Stockholm on many Sundays and especially holidays. Graham's house was a place to be with between 15 and 30 attendees. Siblings, Lorraine, Eleanor, Tina, Linda, and Elmer, along with spouses and grandchildren and extended family members. there for Graham's famous Swedish meatballs, fresh-made rolls from the wood stove and oven, and during certain times of the year, there was sill. Sill and hardtack crackers were on the table. I must say I never did partake in the sill, but I did eat the hardtack crackers and the rusk to go along with that. There were always winter activities of skiing, sliding, snow cave making in the afternoons, and then back in for snacks later on. In the summer, the activities moved to Madawaska Lake, to the camp, with potluck dinners, cookouts, water activities, horseshoes, and just good old family time. During the summer, there were also lots of families visiting from away. Linda and her family would come, Elmer and family would come, and those Carlstroms from the Massachusetts area always made a good time and lots of memories. I remember also trips that we took that Graham was with us, or it may have been just our mother, Lorraine, and the times we stopped in Millinocket to visit Andrew and Marcella. The family members that lived around the immediate area would all come and gather at Andrew and Marcella's, and it was just like a family reunion, even though it was only for a couple hours. I also remember stopping at Adina and Henry's in Massachusetts. And the one memory that I have that I remember most is a big steel bottle opener that was attached to the tree out by the horseshoe stake. And no, it wasn't for opening soda, but beer. It got a lot of use during those horseshoe games. I also remember that Adina never had gray hair or white hair or even into her 90s. Was it a wig? We would never know. Graham was always up for a picnic, so on several occasions in the fall, we would strike out on a Sunday around the county and stop for hot dogs, fresh brewed coffee from a coffee can pail with a wire handle over the fire. And yes, dessert too, as we were at a rest stop area in our travels. Graham loved her times with family and her sweets too. Graham was a hard worker as well. I know that rubbed off on our mother, Lorraine, as the two of them spent a lot of time together, either when at our home or at Graham's. The work ethic seemed to follow the same pattern. They were up early, right to work, late to bed before beginning the same regiment over again the next day. I remember at Graham's sleeping upstairs in the winter in what I believe was a feather bed, because once I got into it, it was hard to get back out, but it sure was soft and warm. I remember hearing the wood stove being rekindled in the morning, and as the warmth started to move upstairs, after a little while, it was time to crawl out and sit by the wood stove downstairs. Graham was always up for traveling, and yes, our mother Lorraine too was right there along with her and Ernest as they drove to Massachusetts to visit the Carlstroms, Connecticut to visit Elmer and family, Arizona to visit Linda and family, Oregon where they visited family friend John Hoagland, and they even flew to Alaska to visit Elmer when he was up there, and other Stockholm citizens that were in Alaska as well. Both Graham and mother Lorraine were community-minded and members of their respective churches. Graham at the Stockholm Lutheran Church Women, the Stockholm Historical Society, and the Stockholm Senior Citizens. Mother, Lorraine, was in Washburn at the Lidstone Memorial Methodist Church. She also was with the United Methodist Women, the Salmon Brook Historical Society, and the Washburn Senior Citizens, to name a few. And of course, when she was in Stockholm, she always was right there with Graham at all of her activities. Graham, Selma, and our mother Lorraine were two special people, certainly represented the characteristics of the pioneer settlers of the Carlstrom family. Every time I drive by the farm and the picnic area at Carlstrom Hill, I wonder what it was like back in those early days, and thank God that I am lucky enough to have known our grandmother, Selma, and I've had Lorraine as our mother. And at this time, John is going to come do a reading from our Aunt Linda.
As Larry said, Linda, which is Zelma's youngest daughter, prepared some information. She's not here because, like her mother, Zelma, she's very involved in Stockholm, the Stockholm Museum. This is a very busy time, and she felt she needed to be there to help out the museum. But she wrote, Anshelm and Ingabor Carlstrom came to Stockholm from Jämtland, Sweden in 1888 with 2 children. We've all heard some of this, but it says that Peter, age 4, and Christina, age 2. They were old friends of the John Sodergrens and put their first log cabin across the road. I can't imagine building a log cabin, but the cabin was later dismantled and moved beyond Madawaska Lake, which is a distance of probably 5 or 6 miles. And there's presently a picnic area along that road called Carlstrom Hill. And this year, a lot of Maine had a lot of very nice lupins. That farm, beautiful lupins this year, I've heard people say and taken pictures of. Landowners gave Anshelm permission to stay there if he would look out for fires. He was one of the first fire wardens in that area, I guess. But he was not permitted to clear any land at first. So he made his living by collecting and tanning animal pelts, which he made into moccasins and boots to be sold. Hard life. He also made skis. A pair can be seen in the New Sweden Museum. After he got a deed to the land, he was finally able to cut down trees, burn, and clear the land. Then he started a small business at Madawaska Lake on the property now known as Rainbow Cove. There were 2 cottages that he made by the lake shore, a small store and a stable for the horses. He built boats and rented them out by the day or by the hour. It was a grand place for summer outings. A larger store was later built, and Peter and his wife Bessie sold meals there. By now, 5 more children had been born: Adina, Gustav, Herman, Andrew, and Selma. A new house and barn had been built on the farm. The Carlstroms were the first place the long, weary travelers came upon after making their way through the long wooded road from Fort Kent, and became a place to rest the horses, get a hot meal, and spend the night. The Carlstroms spoke only Swedish, while most of the visitors spoke English or French, but they all managed to communicate. I remember a story our mom, Lorraine, told us, is that when her parents lived out in a place called California, which is way out at the end of a road, no electricity, nothing. They had ordered, probably from Sears and Roebuck, a stove, and the front of the stove had little mica windows, so when there was a fire inside, you could see the flames, and the stove was primarily for heat, not for cooking. Well, when Anshelm and Ingabor knew that the stove had been delivered, they had to go see the stove. How they found out, I don't know. Probably someone told somebody. So they hitched up the team and the wagon, and they drove, I figure it's a good 10 miles anyway, down the road, which are not like the roads today, out to the end of the other road to see the stove. And I guess had coffee and all the normal things. That was a normal, good time, I guess, for them. But thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. So at this point, we have some gifts over here to pass out, and I am going to look through my notes, make sure I don't miss anything here. My dad's still in here? There he is. Okay. Have I missed anything, Dad? We're going right to the gifts. That's all I've got in here. Is there anything else that you thought of? Yeah, anybody out there that want to share something? They're just dying to share a story. We've got a wireless mic we can pass around for that purpose. Just raise your hand really high. Right there, okay. Or you can come up here, whatever you want to do. All right, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm Joe Chilton. My mother was Josephine Carlstrom, one of the... Look in your book. I don't know which. There's... Quick story. This one's about Loretta, who is here today. My mother told me this, so it must be true. When the kids were very small, they had 12 children, so the kitchen was very busy in the morning, breakfast time. And Loretta comes down from upstairs and said, "Ma, I kicked over the chamber pot." And Grandma, being very busy, hands her the mop and says, "Clean it up." Okay? Loretta comes back 5-10 minutes later, says, "It's all done." Grandma says, "Oh, you cleaned it all up?" "Yep. And I had enough for every room."
Anybody need a definition on chamber pot? No, anybody? Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else have something they want to share? We're going to end with chamber pot, huh? Okay. All right. Yes, Dad. You might want the microphone for that.
In doing this reunion, one of the first people I spoke with is Steve Johnson. He's from the state of Washington, and he just walked in a little while ago, and I was shocked and dumbfounded to see him. I know a lot of people here have asked if Steve was coming. Well, who was asking me? Well, yeah, there you go. So, Steve, so glad that you made it. This is great. This is great. I just wanted to recognize Steve. You want to say anything? Okay, we'll pass.
Okay. Well, welcome, Steve. Okay, anybody else? All right. We have some... Yes? Sure. In Swedish?
No,
Okay.
just a little light-hearted humor while I was researching my speech. Why do Swedish boats have barcodes on them? Barcodes on the ships. So they can scan the Navy in. What do you call a constipated Swede?
Oh, no.
Far from pooping. Bop, bop.
That goes with chamber pots, that's right. Oh, boy. Okay. Everybody loves a good laugh. Anybody else? No. Okay. So, one other thing, Dad? All right, thanks, Dad. So, the oldest male descendant. We have a hat for you. That's present here, of course. So, I know my dad's 88. You don't count, that's right. He doesn't want to get any gifts. All right, let's get some... Ansel? How old are you, Ansel? That's right, you're 88. Anybody older than 88? Anybody else also 88 besides my dad? All right, so you got a Moody's Diner hat. Okay, so for the oldest female descendant, we don't have a hat, we have a cookbook from Moody's Diner. Let's see. I don't know, ladies, do you want to share your age? We already know that somebody's 85. Anybody more than 85? Sound like an auctioneer here. Do I hear 86? No? We got 85, and I know it's over here, right? Okay, and I forgot your name. Loretta. Okay, Loretta, here you go. Moody's Diner Cookbook. All right. Newlyweds. Anybody here recently married, like this year? Raise your hand. All right. Anybody married less than 2 years? Got to put them up high. So when were you married? 2 years ago. Anybody more recently married than 2 years ago? All right. Well, what your names are? Brett and Brooke? All right, Brett and Brooke, we have a cookbook and a hat. You can decide who gets which. All right, now for those who've been married the longest. I know my mom and dad don't count. They don't want to get any gifts, but they're like 58 years, something like that. Anybody in there been married 60 years or more? The two of you here? How many years? 65 years? All right, I think that's going to be hard to beat. Anybody beat 65? All right, and we have Francis and Arlene Carlstrom. Congratulations. All right, for those who traveled the furthest, cookbook and a tumbler and some maple syrup. So, how do we figure that out? I came from Nobleboro, so that's not the furthest. Anybody out of New England, outside of New England? Okay, Noel, yes, you guys came from Pennsylvania. And where'd you folks come? California? All right, that's going to be hard to beat. Anybody? I don't think you can travel further than California. Oh, what part of Washington? What part of California? I don't know my geography well enough. Oh, how close are you to the ocean? 3 miles from the ocean. We need a map, people. You have a gift to each of them. All right, we got another set right there anyways. Good. All right. So, Beck, you want to come up and get these? We got a cookbook, tumbler, and maple syrup. I think you're getting the maple syrup. You like maple syrup? So the Washington couple, family. Oh, Steve, okay. I see 2 hands. Okay, behind us. Okay, great. Okay. All right, one more. The youngest descendant. Probably the youngest descendant is not going to benefit from this thing of candy. I doubt it, because I heard babies here. So let's just acknowledge the youngest person here. I know there's a little one over here that earlier, but they're no longer here, right? But ages. I have great nephews back there who are 10 months, 11 months. Anybody younger than 10 months, 11 months? I can't see. No? Well, they're twins, Abraham and Asher, so I don't think you want us giving them candy. Now, that was your great-grandfather's decision, so congratulations. It's great hearing all the new life here, isn't it? I love hearing all the babies cry. Doesn't sound great, especially grandparents. We love to hear that. Parents aren't so excited about it, but grandparents like it. Well, anyways, that pretty much wraps everything up. I want to thank you all for coming. Remind you, we got pictures we're going to take out front. Rather than here, in here, the weather has improved and it's pretty hot in here, so we're going to start out front. So what are we starting with, Mark? The whole group. So this is probably the best way to get this done if we just headed that way right out front, and then let's give some instructions right now. So what specifically do you want to do, Mark and Tori, so that people know where to stand right away? Oh yeah, that's right. One more thing. Yeah, I did mention this and said just leave it on the table, but once you put it on that back table where you got all your name tags when you leave, we'll collect them from there. So, and tomorrow, I mentioned that, tomorrow we're having that service here, so if you're planning on coming, it's going to be here. Okay, great. So we'll do some pictures. We'll go right out front. We'll get you organized out there. So let's just meet you out front and get a group picture. Thank you, everybody.
Let me butt in just for a second. Folks, we're going to make a little history here with this photograph, besides this whole event. So please, this is going to be a hard thing to do. We're going to set up everybody out there in 3 rows. The youngest or shortest people in their first row, then a second row in chairs, and then a third row taller people. And so we'll try and do this as efficiently as we can. If we all participate, then maybe we'll get out of here before 7:30. Thank you.